Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. My name's Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening, folks. This week, I am joined once again by a member of the cast of, I have to say the full title, Sagas of Sundry, Goblin Mode. Internally, we just call it Goblin Mode, but I will use its name in its entirety. Sagas of Sundry, Goblin Mode. He plays Tippy, ... I won't give anything away.
That's it.
The end. Who is a goblin, as expected. You're actually we'll get into it. He's also a filmmaker, a writer, somebody I used to work with back in the old days of Nerdist when we had 9 million people working for us. And yeah, he's just a cool dude. We're going to talk about some cinema, specifically Bong Joon-ho, and then we'll just get into it. But please welcome Jason Nguyen. Hi, buddy.
Hi, guys. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being here. We used to see each other every day, and then
I loved it.
And it was
really good. Those were good old days, you know?
Those were good old days. Y'all making, like, you and Eric were making TikToks back when that was just like a first, like nobody even knew what TikTok was yet.
That was on the tail end of this thing we had, this beautiful thing we had that was coming, that was sunsetting.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because I used to work at Nerdist, and I was responsible for a lot of the sketches on Nerdist Presents, and I worked with Bowser and my buddy Eric and Matt, who's still at Nerdist, which was awesome, and Dan, and it was a nice little family of making doinks for the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was fun. It was, I mean, again, like I said, we had so many people. We had a whole different studio and stuff like that. This is all behind the scenes Nerdisty stuff, but like, you know, things change and annoyingly and whatever. But but you're still doing good. I'm assuming. No.
It's horrible. I'm on the streets.
You're doing terribly, but you're a goblin on Sagas of Sundry Goblin Mode. Of course, we've had Amy on and Dan on, and Danielle will have been on. I don't know what order these are going to go out in, but so talk about, you know, doing D&D like for a show, because like there's a difference between playing at home, obviously, and then doing it like on camera where you're trying to be like entertaining at the same time.
Listen, I love D&D, and I play privately. Like I play in my personal life. I play a lot of D&D. I DM games as well. But I've never played on camera, and it was really interesting to sort of get used to that and enter this world, which I feel like Amy and Danielle and Dan are such veterans of. And it was really cool, man. It was really cool. I think it was easier for me because I was playing with people that I knew, and they're essentially my friends. So a lot of the times I just kind of let myself forget that the cameras were there and just play the game, and just be Tippy, which was easy to do because we're very similar.
Yeah. Tippy. So yeah, the premise for those of you, I've talked about it many times on the show, but the premise for those of you who haven't watched yet and or listened, and you can catch up. There's a holiday break. Catch up on the first 11 episodes, either audio wherever you get your podcasts or on Geek and Sundry's YouTube channel. But it's basically like, what if 3 minions of an evil bad guy were the only 3 people who had to go like left and went on a quest of their own and basically see if they can become heroes in their own right. And it started out so kind of like, you know, funny, kind of comedic, like look at these dorks, and then like it gets like, that's the best thing about shows like this or about campaigns like this, is that it becomes serious when it needs to, and then it's still very silly and everything like that. And I love it when you guys have to switch gears, going from like bits to like, oh, this is like an actual like problem we have to take care of and stuff like that. Talk about the creation of Tippy, because Tippy is the only goblin in the Goblin Mode cast. The other 2 are skeletons, but like, you know, what were, you know, you and Amy obviously had to talk about like, you know, stuff to get into and you can actually listen to Session 0 if you guys anybody wants to listen to their Session 0. That's out now on Realm. But anyway, talk about the creation of Tippy as a character.
The creation of Tippy has been one of my favorite character creation things. I think for me, especially if you listen to Session 0, like I think everybody's inclination when they play like a fantasy game or they're involved in a fantasy story, right? Whether it's like watching Lord of the Rings or playing D&D, you want to be the hero. I think that's like your gut instinct is I'm gonna make the coolest, most badass character I can make. So when I was first thinking of Tippy, I was like, oh, he's gonna be like a tabaxi, and that, which is a cat person, by the way, and he's gonna like be acrobatic and do all these cool things. And then talking to Amy and talking more about the story and that we were these minions in a dungeon and we weren't necessarily supposed to be cool. I was like, you're right. Like, I need to be a goblin. If the show is called Goblin Mode, I feel like I need to be a goblin, and I need to be a goblin that is essentially somebody who really, really, I think, has it in him to be something bigger, but is super comfortable just being ignored and being left alone.
Yeah.
And so to get dragged into the light every episode, he grows a little bit more, and that was the idea behind creating Tippy. And I liked his name. Yeah, a character that often was clumsy and fell down all the
Yeah.
time.
Very much so. When it's, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, because you were playing it, but it always seemed like with Tippy, you got to kind of just go, what's the thing that probably I wouldn't do in any other circumstance in a game? Let me just do that,
Yeah, it was destroying sort of like the min-max
Yeah.
part of my brain. That's like, if I do, how many spell slots do I have, and how much damage can I do? And it was really more of like emotionally leading with the heart. Like, what would he just do, just out of pure raw like emotion? And
Yeah.
like, oh, his hot crush is in trouble. He's gonna just run it.
Yeah. And that's like, you maybe don't expect there to be some sort of like romantic element involved in these people's lives, and yet that happens too. So that is really the fun of watching it. I've said before, I don't play D&D. I'm not really into it. But I do enjoy watching people who are good at it play. How can I, especially when a story is that fun. And it's also because I know all you guys as well. So that's sort of fun to just be like, watch you try to make Amy have to do horrible voices. It's really
That's the
fun.
best part of the show.
Yeah.
That's the best part.
How long does it take you to make Amy break in any given episode? That's usually pretty fun too. So
it's all we want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are obviously, not obviously, it's not obvious at all, but there are 9 more episodes that'll be coming after the holiday break, starting in January. So if you haven't listened and or watched, please go back. And I would highly recommend, like, our editor, Matt Caron, who's been on the show before to talk about Dune, is kind of a master when it comes to like putting sound effects and like adding visual layers and things like that. So in either way you choose to enjoy Goblin Mode, like, you're going to see something cool or hear something cool, because I know he's like pulling his hair out trying to make it like sound as cool as possible. So,
and keep giving Matt his flowers. I mean, like, you guys got to understand, it's an improvised D&D show that we shot for like 4 hours.
yeah.
That he turned into like a 1 hour epic like story, which I don't understand. I don't have the brain capacity to do that. So it's amazing.
Yeah. It's definitely give him his flowers online if you get a chance, because he's a mad genius and also legitimately losing his mind. He's been working on this nonstop for like 6 months. I think it's getting to him, but in a fun way. He's doing it for fun. But yeah. So, Jason, you obviously are a big movie fan. I know this because we used to see each other much more frequently. But like, what are when I was asking you like what you wanted to talk about, you movies was the answer, and that's always something I want to talk about. You specifically called out Bong Joon-ho as a filmmaker you wanted to discuss, and it's fine by me, obviously, because he is so good, and all of his movies have something different to offer, which I think is really, really enjoyable. What was your first introduction to Bong Joon-ho, and what drew you to him?
I mean, he is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I think there is an earnestness about how he approaches almost like genre stories, right? These like big genre stories. I mean, I don't know if people see him as a genre director, but like I see him as a genre director. The first movie I ever saw of his was Memories of Murder.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, sorry guys, piracy is bad, but I remember getting a link, a nefarious link to watch Memories of Murder, and it wasn't subtitled, right? It was just in Korean.
Oh, wow.
I just watched it, right? And I understood the story, like, completely. Understood the stakes, understood what was going on. And I think when I did that, I was like, this is a filmmaker I really like and I want to emulate someday. Like that idea of his visual storytelling is genius. It's great.
Hmm.
And yeah, so Memories of Murder was the first thing I saw. And then I, of course, rewatched it subtitled. And the very next movie was the movie that sold me forever on him, which was Mother.
Yeah, I see. Well, yeah, I see
We'll
that
get into this. We'll get
on your
into this.
letterbox.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
the first one I ever saw of him was The Host, which I saw because it was a
Yes.
monster movie, and I saw that in college, and I didn't know anything about him at that point because I hadn't seen Memories of Murder or Barking Dogs Never Bite or whatever it's called,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was his first movie. I think there's something about but around that time there was, I don't know if you remember this, you're younger than me, but like there was this push after the early J horror boom of
Hmm.
there was a company called Tartan which put out Tartan Asian Extreme as like a
Yeah.
video or a DVD imprint, and so there was just a lot of Japanese, Hong Kong, and Korean films, usually pretty hard genre movies getting released. And I remember like Old Boy was, that was Park Chan
Oh,
Wook
oh
was
my God. Yeah.
which is another great movie, but that was the first time I had really seen any. And there's intricacies, and if you're just watching a movie, you might not realize this, but if you watch enough Korean cinema specifically, there is such a unique tone to it. It it handles genre in a very specific way that Japanese
Yeah.
films and Hong Kong films don't.
Yeah.
And Bong Joon-ho, I think, really embodies that. But like I remember watching Old Boy for the first time and being like, oh, it's going to be like a gritty kind of revenge movie, and it is, but it's also like so much more cerebral than that and much more
Right.
tragic. And I feel like that is really something that comes through a lot in both Park Chan-wook's films and Bong Joon-ho's films, is sort of
I
like
think
the kind of tragic, serio-comic tragedy of it all.
exactly. I think that's the best phrase for it. And I think there are layers to just Korean cinema in general that these directors are able to do that blow my mind every time. If we're talking about Old Boy, it's crazy to think about a movie without any spoilers, like having this iconic fight scene guy with a hammer, but also have this like cerebral like chase through memory lane
Yeah.
towards the end of the movie where you're like going through somebody's memories through their trauma to try to remember the specific thing, and that just feels like two different styles and two different movies, but
Mm-hmm.
somehow beautifully part of the same sort of tragic thread. I don't know. I really enjoy it. I think Bong Joon-ho has that in him as well for his
Yeah.
movies.
And there's sort of like a weird ennui, I think, to the, that is very pretentious. You mentioned that earlier, like pretentious as well.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
folks.
Sorry, guys.
But there's sort of like, I remember after watching Old Boy and being like, okay, cool. But then I'm realizing, oh, he has two other
Yes.
revenge movies, and those ones are even less like straightforward revenge. Like it's all kind of about how revenge is bad, and like
Yeah, all of them are.
it kills the revenger as much as the revengee and stuff like that. And Memories of Murder is actually a later one I saw, and Mother as well, of Bong Joon-ho, and it was sort of like you think you know where it's going, and then it doesn't go that way, and it's sort of like it's about the lack of closure or the lack of a satisfying ending in a lot of cases. And Parasite, we'll obviously get to Parasite, that's the big one, but even that one is sort of like you think you know where it's going, and you think it's just like aha, fun romp, and then it takes such a hard left turn, and you just kind of have to go with it. And that's really the hallmark, I think, of Bong's filmmaking, but also just like Korean cinema in general. The more we get into it, I think, it's kind of cool to see that it's become so big in the West
I know.
over the past like decade or so.
I think the thing that attracts me to him the most in filmmakers like him is that they never lose sight of the human element in a movie in this format. And what I mean by that is like, I grew up loving movies, so when you think about the movies that like immediately come to mind, it's like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and these big sort of 80s epics where the protagonist feels like this untouchable thing. And you think about Indiana Jones and it's like he doesn't seem like a person to me, you know what I mean? But
Right.
it's still like you're still gonna watch it, you're still gonna enjoy it, you're still gonna love it. And you think about Bong Joon-ho's films, and even though they can get crazy, like Snowpiercer and Okja, there is this human element that never goes away, that grounds the genre in this really lived-in reality that I just love and I want more of, and I can't wait to see what else he makes. But yeah, that's like the thing I'm attracted to the most.
I don't know if this is 100% accurate, and this is sort of just something I thought about at the moment, but like that something that separates South Korean filmmaking from other Asian cinema, it to me is like, so Japan was obviously occupied by the US for a long time, and it became very, very westernized.
Yeah,
And the same with Hong Kong, was occupied by the British for hundreds of years, and then so obviously was very, very westernized. Whereas South Korea was not ever occupied by a Western power, but was very influenced by it, and so still retains, I think, a lot of the. I don't know. It's a tough one because it could not be like Seoul is one of the most like gorgeous metropolises ever. But they did it without having to be like under the thumb of one of those nations. But then they also had fascism literally right across, a
right, right,
dictator like
right,
right as
right,
close as possible. So I don't 100% like have a full like thought on that, but I think that has to be influenced somewhere where they go, we want to be, you know, cosmopolitan and westernized, but we didn't have to lose a war to do it, that kind of thing.
right, right. And I think there's got to be something about, like, especially in Bong stories, it's usually all about like the status and class difference between
Yeah.
the poor people and the rich. And I think that isn't so much as a Bong perspective as it is, I think, a Korean perspective, where
Hmm.
there's such a long, like, the Korean War went on for 3 years, for a long time, but then the aftermath of it, like
Yeah.
the having to adjust to this new, like, ceasefire, half nation state, like, sort of thing going on, I think led to a lot of, poverty and class differences, right?
Yeah.
And I love that Bong manages to pull that into every story he tells, kind of.
Yeah. Well, and even stuff like Squid Game, which he did not have anything to
Yeah,
do with, but like, um, that is all about these rich people who basically like entice the poors to do this thing. It's like, oh, go kill yourselves and we'll
yeah,
get you a big pile of money. And it's just like, it's horrifying. And then the fact that like real game shows in America are like, well, let's
yeah.
just do Squid Game, but without the murder. And it's like, it's not good. Like, I don't,
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I feel like we really didn't understand the message when we put out, like, the Squid game show,
yeah.
and it was just like, wait, guys, this isn't a good thing. Like, we should not be celebrating this. Like, you're forced to, like, do this thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the class struggle is such a huge part of it. And like, and that is a huge thing, obviously. And I think all of Bong's movies, for the most part, I'd have
Yeah,
to like look, but there is like, you see where the poor people live, and it's very close to where the rich people live, or
yeah,
at least like you can see the rich people. It's literally the house on the hill. Like, you see
yeah,
it in Parasite, where like they have to go up the hill to get to the rich
yeah.
people's house, and all the way down the hill is where they live, and it's like literally like half
Yes,
underground little.
subterranean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
um
It's like money is the actual antagonist in all of his films.
I
You know
think,
what I
yeah, I
mean?
think you're
Yeah,
absolutely right. And the kind of, in Mother, where it's sort of like, um this kind of, that's a tough, touchy one to talk about, but sort of like it's about a
yeah,
mother trying to defend her, mentally challenged son for this horrible crime, and then like finding, just like being really disillusioned
yeah.
by the whole process and everything, and just.
Well, well, he sneaks it in. He's more sneaky in Mother, because in Mother, her plight is also that she like sells herbs, like dried herbs, as a job, and she does acupuncture,
Yeah.
and like she's not making any money in this. She's getting fleeced by lawyers who don't really care about her son because they think it's a closed shut case, and money's still like the pressure that's building and a lot of these characters. I think the one where I'm less clear about it maybe is the host, but even that, there's like humble beginnings, and the reason why that they've got a little, like, food stand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I believe that money is the antagonist in all this film.
I think you're right. And that one, like, they're not in it very much, but the antagonist of Host is basically um the US, like the people, like
Yeah.
the drug manufacturers or whoever like
Right.
created
Right.
the chemical
Right.
company that created the creature in the first place and just sort of lets
Yeah.
them go. But during Halloween, my wife and I watched Train to Busan, which I'd actually never seen before. And that's
Oh,
another one
really?
that,
Ah,
yeah, I
banger.
was really like, that
Banger.
was one that was always on my list, and I finally watched it. And that too is like the train metaphor between both that and Snowpiercer is like, it's very clear in Snowpiercer, but I think it's there in Train to Busan also, where it's like you got to get further up the train, and like, you know, there's the rabble of the pores like coming up at you and stuff like that. Like that's a really, that's a powerful like image, and it seems to be something that kind of really resonates. um
We we get Ma Dong in that movie. I can't pronounce his last name or his full name, but the big guy who punches
yeah.
things. He's spun off and done his own movies where the premise of the movie is that he punches things,
Yeah.
which is the best ever. If you've ever seen the Roundup or
Yeah. I
yeah,
watched the
it's
Roundup
great.
and didn't even realize it was a sequel or a spin-off to a different movie. And I was just like, who's, I mean, this is awesome. And then like, I was like, oh, he's like the side character in this other cop movie. And they just like gave
Yes,
him his own movie because he is cool and punches stuff.
the
Um,
best, the
yeah, he's
best.
great. And he's, I mean, that movie is really, Train to Busan's excellent if you haven't seen it.
And again, it's like it's that human element. It's like we've
Yeah,
seen zombie stories, we've seen we've
totally.
seen so many, and especially the American audience, like we love that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And there's something about that. Like I cried at the end of that movie,
Oh yeah.
and I was like, what? I was like, what? How did this get me? You know, but that's something I really appreciate about Korean storytellers. I think their attachment to emotion is just like so clear, and I'm jealous. I want
Yeah.
to do that. It's so cool.
Well, and it's also a big help because the Korean government wants filmmakers to make films, and of all, they don't, not that they don't care, but they want it
Come
to
on,
be
yeah,
huge, and they want it, you know, and it worked. Like
yeah,
the kind of, they want their biggest export to be entertainment, and I think it's actually working really well because, you
yeah,
know, look at how much just like K dramas are on Netflix and that get watched more than a lot of the like, you know, in-house Netflix stuff.
yeah. We
When,
used to do that though. We used to, but, bring those times back.
yeah. Remember when we made stuff as a people? Yeah, so let's go through, you know, Bong's
Yeah,
relatively small filmography. He has a new movie
yeah,
coming out next year called Mickey 17, which is
yeah.
his third American film. Yeah, or his third English language film, I should say.
Right.
But starting with Barking Dogs Never Bite in 2000, which is
Loved it.
it's a rough movie.
Hmm.
This
No
is,
pun intended.
yeah.
No pun intended.
Honestly, I didn't even intend it. Um, but the premise of it, according to Letterboxd, an idle part-time college lecturer is annoyed by the yapping sound of a nearby dog, and he decides to take drastic action. So if you like dogs, maybe give this one a miss. But
Yeah.
it's, this feels like the perfect encapsulation. Like obviously it's rough. It's a less refined, I guess I should say, without being super
Right.
on the point. But like, it's, you know, Duna Bay is in it as well. So, you know, if you've seen, what movie is she in? Well, she's in Snowpiercer, but what is that stupid Wachowski movie?
Cloud Atlas.
Cloud Atlas.
Of course, I can never forget Cloud Atlas.
Yeah, it's the true. The movie's so bad.
Yes,
But anyway,
that
what did you
movie.
think of Barking Dogs Never Bite?
Like, what a first feature! Like,
Yeah.
it's it's a sort of almost like a contained script in a
Mm.
way. It's really all happening at one apartment complex, and it's you can see the restrictions he has with budget and time, but it still manages to be this like full story that you don't really see what's coming next. And it is crazy. Like it is a crazy premise to start a movie, right? Like professor is annoyed by dogs, so he goes and takes matters in his own hands, and you're like, well, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
This is dark. But then it gets to a place that is so fascinating, and you can see like what will soon become little nuggets for like the host and stuff, and character things that he's doing. I really liked it. I really liked that I was stressed out the whole time.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's not a moment in the movie where I'm like, what? Why are we doing this? Like, this isn't what's happening.
There are no
Um,
chill Bong Joon-ho movies. You know what I mean?
exactly,
Like you can't. They're not
exactly.
hangout movies. They're like yeah. But you're right. Like it is very humanist. Like the fact that it's just a guy who gets annoyed and he takes he takes drastic action and like
Yeah,
who hasn't lived in an apartment, and especially that's another good class thing. It's like he's a lecturer at a college, but he still lives in this kind of very small
exactly.
apartment complex that is like all stacked on top of each other, and that stuff gets really that wears you down if you live in a big
And
apartment complex.
and in the story, he can't get tenure unless he bribes his bosses, his teachers, and his professors.
Yeah,
And so there's this element of like he doesn't have the money, and he doesn't morally kind of want to do this, but he has to do this, and it's like this compounding pressure that leads him to do this thing that is horrible. But the story gets crazy. Like the guy who lives in the complex, who's the real bad guy. You know what I'm talking
yeah,
about, without spoiling it.
yeah. I definitely this one was hard to find for a long time, or at least hard to find like in good shape. And I think it has only just recently been. I think Mubi
Yeah.
maybe picked it up, something like that. But definitely give it a watch. This is maybe his least well known over here, but I think it's definitely worth watching. And it's the one that I saw the most recent, I guess I should say, because I was the one
Yeah.
I was always like, this is on my list. And I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Same.
but then his next one is the aforementioned Memories of Murder, which I am very curious. You, as a younger person watching this
Yes.
unsubtitled, what did you get
Yes.
out of it? It is a it's basically like Zodiac or like Mystic River. So it's a slow police procedural. How did you get anything out of it? What did you get out of it without knowing what they were saying?
What I really loved is there's a I don't know how else to say this without there's an Asianness there's like an Asian element to it that feels really relatable to me when I see that like they're yelling at people who are driving the tractor over the crime scene because nobody is just trained or like
Yeah,
nobody knows what's going on. And to me, like there was just a little thing that scratched an itch in my brain where I just knew I'd never seen anything like this. Right? There were so many like, you know, true crime wasn't that big back then either. You know
absolutely.
what I mean? It
Yeah,
wasn't like what it is now, right? And so I just remember seeing it, and that lead actor too is so like interesting to look at and interesting to follow. So when I was watching it without subtitles, I just wanted to know like if he was going to solve it,
yeah,
and that's what I really got out of it. I got like a crime story I'd never really seen before. I like seeing a police station that had like nothing in it, right? I like seeing the interrogation scene where they like have to like put booties on to like yeah, that
yeah.
there were just small little things he was doing that I just found really interesting as a kid, and felt like I'd never seen it before, especially in that format. Like I've seen other movies where it's like you're trying to get the killer and it's like a thriller, but like this one felt the lack of resources all around, the
Yeah.
poverty, like the rural nature of it, I hadn't seen before. So that was really visually interesting to me.
Yeah. There's the element of like, it's the 80s when the case starts, and you have the one cop who is like Song Kang-ho's character. It's he's in everything. If it's a Korean movie, chances are Song Kang-ho's in it.
Yeah, he's in
Um
it. He's in it.
but he is just like kind of a doofus a little bit. Like he's just kind of a thug. He just is like, I'll beat this guy up and then he'll confess and then that'll be it, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then there's the
Right.
other cop who is like much more like, no, we need to be, smarter about this and stuff. And then by the end, not to give too much away, but like they've been working on this case for such a long time that like they start to just lose their mind. And like
Yeah.
the more together cop is the one who like almost does something very rash. And it's like, it's very relatable in that sense, because it's like, because they have no resources, because this has taken over their lives, and the fact that these crimes are so horrific that
Right.
they're just like, we gotta solve it. Like, and, this is another movie where it's like, you don't get the kind of resolution that you think, or that like most Hollywood movies would give you. But it's like, it's the perfect ending. Like, the fact that it's, we have that like kind of framing story
Yeah.
of him in the future, I think is like really,
And I
Um,
think I really connected to it just because, you know, I'm Vietnamese American. I was born in Vietnam, but I came to America when I was like 2, right? And I went back to Vietnam when I was 8, and I think I wasn't ready for the shell shock, whiplash, culture shock
mm,
of seeing sort of that rural way of life, right? And it was really fascinating, but it was quite rural. And I remember my little kid brain being like so overwhelmed by it all. There's so much going on. There's so much to look at that when this movie came out and I watched it later, I didn't watch it when I was 8, but you know, later,
yeah,
uh, there was something I think to me where I was reconnecting the experience of being back in rural Vietnam when I was 8, and then seeing that and being like, oh my God, like what would happen if this happened in my little village neighborhood that I, you know, was born in, that I visited? How would they solve this? They would probably bumble through it just as much as these guys. Like,
yeah.
so I had a lot of fun the first time watching it, imagining like what would happen if it was like, you know, like if this happened in Vietnam, like would it be solved the same way? Would it be interesting? There's something that I really enjoyed about just not seeing, you know, this come in and then like they've got the case files all ready to go and they're in suits, you know what I mean? That like seeing it so accessible and like something I could actually picture happening in an experience I had. Not that I ever want a serial killer to be running loose in my hometown.
What are you talking about? Just
No,
kidding.
I don't think I want that. I don't think I
Okay.
want that.
Mm,
That's what attracted me to this, and then you know
yeah.
the rest is history.
Yeah, totally. And there's a lot, you know, I think, you know, this came out only a couple years after the TV show CSI came out, which is all, you know,
Yeah,
flashy big city crime scene investigations and
right.
stuff like that. And we get, and, you know, like Law and Order, that's obviously in Manhattan. And like, there's stuff like that about, you know, the way crimes are solved, or at least on TV and movies in big cities, that I think the rural aspect, the kind of small town aspect of it, especially in countries like another movie that comes to mind when we talk about this is The Wailing, which is another horror
Oh
movie,
yeah,
which is another
yeah.
like series of crimes where a cop in a very rural area has to kind of like be bigger than himself and try to figure out what's going on. That one's a supernatural element, spoilers,
Yeah, yeah.
um but like where his you know uh precinct or whatever is, it's in the boonies, like it's in on the hill, like everybody kind of lives in small little, you know, you know, just little hovels, one could say, like, you know, not to be like super um classist there, but and I find that really interesting. I, you know, even there's a trilogy of movies based on a book, which are called the Red Riding trilogy. I don't know if you've ever seen that or read
No,
it,
no, no,
but it's
no.
about another serial killer in Yorkshire in England in the 70s through the 80s. And it's less about the series of crimes and more about just the utter corruption in the West Yorkshire Police Department, and how
Wow.
just
Okay.
like
Yeah.
they just were like, we do whatever we want. We're, you know, the sheriff of this town and stuff like that. And it's a really fascinating, and like the middle chapter, a cop from the big city, which is Manchester, comes and like can't get anything done because the cops in Yorkshire are just so corrupt and they don't give a shit and stuff like that. And I find myself much more nowadays connecting to that kind of crime story because you're right, like we've seen that kind of stuff over and over and over again, but
Yeah.
we've never really seen them in this way. And then that was, you know, Memories of Murder is like, it's in the Criterion Collection now if you want to watch it, but like it's
Yeah. Because I think the thing about true crime and the thing that maybe turns me off sometimes is that true crime can feel at times like it is this like sensationalized version of what's going on for the audience to just like rub their hands together and
mhm.
get excited for. Because and I like true crime. There's some of it that I really like, but I think what I like about things like this and even like Seven or not Seven,
Mhm.
but Zodiac, like it reminds us that like these are people's jobs that are like that they
Right.
have to do, and the struggles of like trying to do that and live your life can be crippling, um, especially when you think about like the Zodiac case and how long that took to solve. And and I can't imagine that in a place that has even less resources. So I like when true crime stories remind us that it's like people's like jobs and lives attached to this like horrible thing that happened.
Yeah. And the fact that, like, did you ever watch that documentary? I don't love Netflix true crime documentaries because most of the time they're
Right,
very sensationalized and it drives me nuts.
right.
But I do think that the one that they did a couple of years ago about the Night Stalker
Yes,
was really good. And I
yes,
really like the fact that these cops were on this case for such a long time. And
yeah,
like the one cop's wife was like, I don't want you on this case anymore. Like, I'm
yeah,
scared and all this stuff. And
yeah.
I thought that was really, because you do miss that aspect in a lot of it. It's like, you don't want. I think a lot of people see true crime as like very sexy and like, ooh,
Yes.
this is, I can figure this out. And everyone's like
Well,
an at-home sleuth and stuff. And it's like, no, these people
right,
had to do this as a job at a time when it was tougher to do that.
right.
Um, with fewer resources, and there was a crime spree in LA, and it's not fun, honestly, to walk into crime scenes like that.
Yeah, it's got to be terrible.
Yeah,
It's got to
it's
be
gotta be.
terrible.
I
It's
wouldn't do
got to
it.
suck, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
wouldn't do
I would say it's probably not great. But yeah, that movie's incredible. I that may be my second favorite after Parasite. Although Mother, we'll get to Mother in a second, but like
Yeah,
Mother is really excellent. But in between those two, he made The Host, which was from 2006. Like I said, like this one is the most kind of big, kind of quote unquote studio style like
yeah,
monster movie. But even it kind of the fact that like the daughter gets kidnapped or taken, we think murdered or eaten
right.
by this creature early on. It doesn't make it like it is this family trying to figure out
Yeah,
we're going to go into like the monster zone or whatever, the
right, right.
quarantine zone to try to find our daughter slash granddaughter. And I think this actually is much closer to Parasite than most people would
Yes,
think. I was pretty
yes.
surprised rewatching it last year how much it was like that.
I also love the fact that the VFX was done by Weta. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's something so funny to me about like, well, he got the Lord of the Rings guys involved in making his like creature feature, which is awesome to me.
Yeah.
Going from Memories of Murder to The Host is, I think, fascinating.
Absolutely. Like you would not necessarily see that. Like this feels like it could be the outlier of his filmography. Um,
Right,
even with Okja involved, like, but that one's a little more, that's a political satire kind of thing.
right.
Um, but no, I think it absolutely fits in with everything, and the fact that like each of the members of the family are kind of they're like you were saying, they're kind of poorer people. They're just kind of getting by.
Mhm.
The father of the teenage daughter, who's again played by Song Kang-ho, is not a bright bulb, let's say, but he's like, but that's the bet. Like I love that character so much because he's so passionate, even though he's a doofus and
I
eats
think that's what he
beans and
likes. I think that word
yeah,
is like doofus. Like I
yeah,
think Bong is really good at making us fall in love with like doofuses,
yeah,
right? People who are like just kind of slow, right?
yeah.
Kind of not all there, but it's kind of genius because it's like, yeah, you're rooting for that guy. How is that guy going to beat like the giant like monster that has come out of nowhere from the water, you know?
Yeah. This weird
Um,
tadpole fish monster thing.
yeah,
That opening sequence, or opening attack sequence, I should say,
yeah,
where we barely see the monster, and when you do see it, it's like out of focus behind people and stuff. It's incredible. It is a truly great, like,
so good.
and I'm sure you have as well, but like I've seen a billion kaiju movies, and like that's one of the best
Yes.
versions of that type of giant monster thing.
Yeah, and this is his kaiju movie. This
Yeah,
is
it
his
is.
kaiju. Yeah, this is his kaiju movie. So it's great. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
opening sequence.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody just is like they do not know what to do because it's not so big that you can see it coming. Like, but it's like the size of a truck basically. Like it, but it moves in such a creepy way. Like the fact that it's like hanging under the bridge and stuff like that. Like there's
Yeah,
just so many like really creepy things about it. But quickly you find out that the movie's not actually really about the monster at all. Like it's just about
no,
this search for this girl. Um, but yeah, that Scott Wilson, the late lamented Scott Wilson, who used to be on The Walking Dead, but he's a great actor. He's been in a million things, but
mm.
he plays the scientist at the beginning who's just like, who cares? Chuck it into the river. Like, it's just like, it's all your fault, you dummy. Um, yeah, it's It's good. I would highly recommend people give this one a shot. You might not even realize that Bong Joon-ho directed it, but
It's honestly a nice starting one
yeah,
for a Bong Joon-ho movie, right?
yeah,
Like if you're afraid of, because like we're being pretentious about stuff, but if you want to
absolutely.
just enjoy a fun monster movie and like you don't necessarily need to get cerebral, like The Host is a perfect one to start on for sure.
Yeah. And it's pretty short too, if I remember correctly. Oh, no, it's 2 hours. It's not very short.
It's 2 hours. It
It's
goes
exactly
fine
2
quick. You're
hours
having
long.
a good time.
But you're having a good time. Yeah, it
That's fine.
flies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was 2006. 2009 is when he makes Mother. Now, this
Mother.
is on your list of favorite movies ever. I want dig into it. What drew you to this one and why is it your favorite?
Everything. So
Great.
Mother is
Moving
one
on.
of my top four. Yeah, let's keep going. Mother is one of my top four films of all time. I think it is a masterpiece. Don't throw that word around lightly. I really do. It's got all the things that I think attracted me to Bong in the first place. The rural nature of his films, like the small town vibes, the unwitting protagonist in this huge sort of story. But more so, I think this is where I think he comes into his own as like a visual storyteller, like a master visual
Mm,
storytelling. And that opening sequence is my favorite opening sequence of all time. It's just
mm.
a woman dancing in this field. But when you watch the full movie and you know the context of why she's doing this, it's like, ooh, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it right now.
Yeah. It's so good. And like
So
again, you
good.
think you know where it's going. This one, if you haven't, it's a mother lives quietly with her son. One day, a girl is brutally killed, and the boy is charged with the murder. Now it's his mother's mission to prove him innocent. And this is Haeja Kim or Kim Haeja, excuse me, is the actress, and
Incredible.
she's so fucking
Wow.
good in this movie. Um, sh- she's not in a ton of. She hasn't been in a ton of
And
things like.
and he
Um,
wrote it for her. He
he
wrote it
wrote it
for her.
for her. Yeah. And she's so stinking good in it. And like
Yeah.
you were with her the whole time, even when she
Yeah.
learns things that make it not great. And she's just like,
Yeah.
you kind of understand everything she does. And yeah, she's mesmerizing. Like that opening sequence where you're like, why is she
Mesmerizing.
dancing? And then it sort of bookends because she dances again at the end. And you're just sort of like, oh my God, like this
There's
whole,
so
yeah.
many there's so many examples of this movie just doing that thing that I think if you're interested in movies or you want to be a filmmaker or even just you like this sort of stuff, like this is a perfect masterclass in that idea of show don't tell, right?
Mm,
Like he kind of does it every scene. And it's like crazy that he can do that every scene. Um, and again, like you said, it's a very simple premise, right? It's a mother to a son who's sort of mentally handicapped, right? And a crime happens in their town, and obviously it's a small town. They're going to blame the handicapped kid,
right.
and her job is to disprove them. It's her son. But there's one of my favorite shots, other than dancing, that dancing opening sequence in this movie is there's a shot where that I think perfectly summarizes the whole film, which is the son, has to take a leak, and he goes outside. And it's this big wide shot, and he's taking a leak against the wall, and the mother, I want to say her name right, Haeja Kim. She comes up and she's feeding him his medicine as he's peeing against the wall, and it's just this like feedback loop of like this pointlessness of what she's doing, or not pointlessness, but like she's trying to do this thing that is pointless in this moment.
Yeah.
Um, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to get too heady here, but that scene to me, like that shot of her feeding him the medicine, he's peeing against the wall, and then like the rest of the story that happens, it's great. It's just so great.
Yeah, it's a great sort of like she's trying to take care of him and he's doing
Yeah,
something stupid or not stupid, but just
yeah,
like kind of gross, like you shouldn't be doing it, like go inside, that kind of thing. Like
exactly,
and
exactly.
and he doesn't stop. Like it's just sort of
Yeah,
like yeah, I think that I mean that's almost a metaphor for parenthood in general. Like I am
yeah,
not a parent, but like
yeah,
I can sort of understand that. But I wanted to call out the cinematographer of this movie, Hong
yes.
Kyung-pyo, who also shot Snowpiercer, Parasite, The Wailing, and then 2018's Burning. If you've
God.
seen
Oh,
that.
banger.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So he
good.
shot all 4 of those movies and a bunch of other things, but like those are the big 4 in terms of like things that the people in the West might have seen. Incredible, or 5, I guess. Incredible films and like just a
Yeah.
beautifully shot sequence. And I hope that movie gets, because that one's I'm a big physical media fan, as I've mentioned many times on this,
Hmm.
and I'm so stoked that now 3 Bong movies are on the Criterion Collection, and Mother is one that
Yes,
I've hoped will join the Criterion Collection for a long
me
time.
too.
I really hope it does, because I think it could benefit from, like, you know, a commentary track or just like some making of stuff or a retrospective. But yeah, I would highly recommend people watching. Actually, I need to watch that one again. It's been a long time since I watched that. I watched that in
That
2018, I think.
definitely do. It's just it's a darker story, but
Yeah,
like there's something that is both heartbreaking and relatable about it again, right? Like I
yeah,
know that mom. I've seen that mom, right? A part of her, she's kind of like my mom, and I've seen she's kind of like my friends' moms, and
yeah,
there's something about her that like I will care for you no matter what happens,
yeah,
because you're my child is something that yeah, it's the perfect setting for a crime story, and it's just so good. Top
yeah.
4, baby.
It's great. Yeah. We'll talk about the other of your top 4 after we
Yeah,
finish this bit, because
yeah,
the
sure.
other 3 are great too. But so then after that, of course, we have Snowpiercer, which that
So
came out
good.
in 2014, which is, I call it the year 2013, excuse me. I called that the summer of good sci-fi, because a ton of really good sci-fi movies came out that summer. That was also the summer of X-Men Days of Future Past and Guardians of the
Wow.
Galaxy and
Yeah.
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and just a lot of really cool sci-fi movies. Snowpiercer again, is based on a French graphic novel, but it is not, the film does not feel French. Let me tell you that much.
No.
Um, it of course is all about people who live on the back of a train, trying to get to the people who live on the front of the train. The person in charge, the conductor, the engineer, I mean, because they're eating glyceride bugs and people,
Right.
like,
Right.
because
Correct.
they are in the back of the train, and it ends up becoming like this action movie. But like, Chris, it's got an amazing cast, by the way. Like, Chris
So
Evans,
good.
Song Kang-ho, John Hurt, Tilda Swinton, Jamie Bell,
Hilda.
Octavia Spencer, Ed Harris, um Ko Ah-sung is the girl in it, Allison Pill. Like, it's just really good, like a banger cast. And the action in it, again, is like that whole sequence where they're fighting with axes in the one train car is incredible. um and again, like, this
I
is just an example of he can do anything.
He can do anything. This is him. This movie is just a flex. The whole thing from start to
Hmm.
finish. This is like I did my cerebral like I am master filmmaker movies. Now this one is me having fun, and if this is what having fun looks like for a filmmaker, then that's crazy, because it's so good. You know, when I first watched it, I didn't think I would like it. When I
Mm,
first watched it, there was something about like, oh, should he be directing it? Like, does he? I felt like I was worried he was sort of forced to do this
right.
studio film to sort of translate his abilities or skill to an American audience, and I was like, oh no, you don't have to do that, man. Like resist, fight the power. You don't need this. But I was wrong. It's
Yeah.
actually just a good film. And I
Yeah.
wasn't convinced until halfway through. Like
Yeah.
at first I was like, okay, like all right, they're gonna get from one door to the next. And then when the axe stuff happened, I was like, never mind. This
Yeah.
is something I wasn't ready for. I didn't understand the stakes. Now I do. My bad.
And like
Um,
we've been talking about, it fully fits into his like oeuvre in terms of the haves and have nots and the class structure. There, it could not be more direct what the class is like. It's not, it's a much worse movie. But High Rise, did you ever see that movie?
yes, I did with Hiddleston, right?
Yes. But
Yes,
that's a
yeah.
similar thing where like the poor people live in the bottom of the high rise and the rich people live at the top
Hmm.
of the high rise. And it's like, it's a very like kind of almost boring metaphor. Like, but I think the fact that this is on a moving train that literally can't stop, otherwise everything will freeze, just like the nature of this weird sci-fi world and everything. Um, and like wrecking the system from the inside out. Like I just dig all of that kind of, and I was kind of with you. I was sort of like, oh, Bong, you don't have to do this. This is another example
Yeah,
of like a cool indie filmmaker having to make, from overseas, who has to make this kind of weird, stupid American movies. But it's not that. It's a good movie. I have not watched 1 second of the TNT TV series, but
not me neither. Me neither. And I love it's the start of the Bong Tilda part
yeah,
friendship arc that's happening. Um, and I love that he's smart enough to understand that like I'm gonna let Tilda do her thing, and it's insane. It's
yeah.
like her performance in this movie is crazy.
She wears these big Coke glasses. She's got like crazy teeth, and she's doing like a very over the top Yorkshire accent.
Yeah,
Um,
it's wild,
it's
but it's
wild.
so
It
good.
is a wild, but she's the villain basically. She's not the villain, but she is a villain in the film, and it's really it's rad. It's super good. And then that was followed up 4 years later with another American film, also starring Tilda Swinton, which is Okja, which is another not. If you're an animal lover, maybe
Yeah,
it's tough because it's about meatpacking. But
I put this movie off for a long time. I
yeah,
didn't watch it initially when it came out, and I was worried that I was like losing sort of my affection for his movies. But I was like, I don't know if I can emotionally put myself through that, right? Because
mm,
I'd only heard the spark notes of what it was about, and then when I watched it, it ended up being not. It ended up being like this like political
mm,
sci-fi almost thriller action movie that I didn't see coming.
yeah.
Um, but I put it off for a long time. That was probably next to Barking Dogs. This was the most recent Bong movie I watched because I just skipped it out of being a baby and and not wanting to watch anything involving meat stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I've definitely, I forget if I've talked about this on the show or not, but like, um, there was a certain point recently where I was like, and it had nothing to do with this movie, but like, I'm just not eating mammals anymore. I just can't
Mm,
do it because like
mm,
it, not to get everybody down, but we had an old cat who was
yeah.
getting sicker and sicker and sicker until he finally passed away. And once you see an animal kind of like on its last, like the last gasps of life,
Uh,
obviously we don't eat cats, I'm not like,
uh,
but like it was just like what am I doing killing animals and eating them, or even if I'm not personally killing them. So anyway, I got to the point where I'm just like, I'm not quite vegetarian, but I'm on my way. Like I still eat fish
right.
and chicken, but like that's basic, and turkey, but that's basically it. um and I haven't had I'm coming up on 2 full years of not eating mammals. Not that everyone should
Yeah.
give me a medal or anything, but
I'm
uh
giving you a medal. I'm
thank you
giving you
so
a
much,
medal.
Jason.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I got you.
But
Yeah,
that
no, that's
was,
incredible.
yeah, but that's the reason why like I've been putting off watching this too. Like just like can't do it because I'm
Yeah,
just worried about it. But like, but I'll finally give it a watch. This is the one I haven't seen.
and
I've come
it's.
clean.
I know this is the only one you haven't seen.
Yeah, I own it. I haven't seen
Yeah.
it. I haven't watched it.
Wow. Okay. I finally did, and it's not what you think it's gonna be. Um, it is still a hard watch. Like I won't
Mm,
lie. Like it gets there's a scene in it that's like definitely skip it if you're sensitive. There's definitely a scene in it that's like
yeah.
yeah, skip that scene. Um, I think out of all of his movies, it's the most over the top.
Mm,
It's the most garish of all of his films. If you thought Tilda was being crazy in the last film, in this film, it's like even wilder, right? And then you've got Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie, like being just as crazy as Tilda.
mm,
The performances are big and intense, um, but the message where it ends up is good. Where the movie lands is good. I think it's also a movie to me out of all if I had and I think all of his movies I'm like his super fan. If I had to rank this movie out of all the movies he did, it would be lower because there is something no matter what you do, there is something about having to interact with like a CG
mm,
animal thing that just as cute as Okja is and as cool as the animal design is, there's something that my brain has a hard time connecting
mm,
empathy wise to this thing because my movie brain can't stop the fact that I know it's CG and I know it's not real and I know it's not there. Um, so It's a good movie though. That being said, definitely give it a try if you're feeling up for it someday. But I feel you. I
Yeah.
skipped it for a long time.
Yeah. I will, just for completeness sake, and also the fact that another Bong movie is coming out soon. It's like, all right, I should probably finally do this. Um, but yeah, I picked it up because it's on Criterion also, and I was just like, I haven't even put the disc in. I haven't even watched anything about it. So I just need to do it. That's one of those like, that I've
It's
just been.
definitely him flexing his storytelling abilities on a scale that actually I think he's cracking the code in Okja of like what is going to work with an American audience. I think he had already figured it out in Snowpiercer, but I think he really refined it in Okja, and it makes sense the progression of Snowpiercer, Okja, Parasite. If you watch those three back to back, you kind of see how he gets to the idea of Parasite, at least to me.
That's fascinating because yeah, you're right. Like Snowpiercer seems like an easy sell for Americans, or an easier sell, because it's a weird sci-fi movie with action in it and stuff. And Okja being a kind of over the top political thing makes it's like, okay, now what? Now what do you think, people in America? I'll make it easy for you to watch because it's on Netflix and stuff like that. And yeah, and then yeah, that obviously leads to Parasite, which is, it made not a little amount of money, but in fact a great deal of it.
How much did it make? How much did it actually end up
Let me look
making?
that up real fast. But yeah, it obviously won all the Oscars.
Yes.
And that was the year that like, that was obvious, that Oscars was like right before the pandemic. So like,
Yeah.
it was great that even happened, because like, if it had been a couple months later, first of all, everything would be shut down, but then he wouldn't have gotten to fly over and do like all the press over here and everything like that. And this was also, I was a huge fan of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was the Tarantino movie that came out the same year,
Right.
that was also nominated for everything. And I was kind of like, oh man, this should be the year that Tarantino wins it, because I think it's like a really great movie. He's a problematic person. Look, I'm not
For
gonna
sure.
sit here and say that,
For
but
sure.
but then like once you see Parasite, it's like, no, this deserves it. Like
Yeah.
this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. I've seen this one. This one I've watched a bunch of times. Like every time I'm like, what do I feel like watching? Well, I'll just put on Parasite again. Worldwide, it made $262 million on a budget of 11.4 million.
Amazing. That's amazing.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. It made
That's
so much
amazing.
money. It made 53 million just in America. Like, and I know a lot of that is the push from the Oscars, but still, like, yeah, it leaps and bounds is his most like successful film. And the fact that it is a purely Korean film, it he's not, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it is a quote unquote foreign language movie, like it is.
100%.
And the fact that it made so much money and it resonates with so many people, and it does have that kind of weird thriller horror kind of twist at a certain point in it. But like, this one I do think would almost work without subtitles. Like if I were just watching this, not that I would need to at this point, but like if like a like a bootleg somewhere,
Yeah.
it's just like, well, I guess I'll just see if I can suss out what's happening. You can almost do it because the filmmaking in it is so precise, and you get the idea. Like the visual metaphors could not be more on point. I think like this is one of the best visual films I've ever seen.
Yeah. I think this is where Bong is just like, it's no longer, I think every movie he's proving something either to himself or to the audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you really watch all of his movies. And then I think Parasite is just him telling an amazing story. I don't think he's proving anything to anybody other than like, this is the story I want to tell. This is like, these are the stories I have been telling. And it's crazy relatable for something that if you actually break down the story is so over the top. It's
Yeah.
crazy over the top. But that idea of like, okay, I'm going to leech off of this rich family because I live in a basement and I need money, and that's all it was. And for it to end up being this people living inside the house under the, no spoilers, but I guess
Yeah.
spoilers. It's amazing to me. Like, it's amazing to me how he landed on the story and how it ended too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like, because even with all of the weird twists and everything about, this rich family has no idea what's happening, and like, it's fun. There's a certain element of it's fun that all of this whole family is like one by one infiltrating this house, and like they're getting all the money from this family and everything
Yeah.
like that, and then to realize what else is going on, and then it stops being fun. It starts being like legitimately terrifying at a certain point, um and just sad. Like there's and the fact that the son at the end, there's that bit at the end where he keeps
Mhm.
like checking his phone, and it's just like, oh man,
Yeah.
like it's I don't know. I really I get so much out of it every time I watch it, and um I find new things to laugh at. Like
Yeah.
there's so much about when the son is helping the rich people's daughter and stuff, and how
Yep.
she's clearly in love with this like cute
Yes.
boy, and he's pretending to be really sophisticated but he doesn't know shit. Like it's really, really funny. Um and and just the using the is it a lemon rind? I think it's a lemon rind, like, because the other housekeeper is allergic to it and stuff, and it's just like, it's
Oh,
so
grapefruit.
grapefruit,
Yeah,
sorry, yeah.
yeah,
It's it's so it makes me laugh, and then it's like I forget that it's gonna turn tragic at a certain point,
yeah.
because
It's
it's
his
like,
funniest film, I think.
I think so too. I think, like,
It's his
it's
funniest film. It's hilarious. Like
yeah,
the first half of that movie is hilarious. Like every person's little quirks and I even love just like the first opening shot where they're just folding pizza boxes as a family to make
yeah,
money. And they're like on each other's case about like you should fold it like this. You're gonna fold faster. You gotta do it like this.
yeah. And they're just, yeah, they're
Um,
sitting in their kitchen, and it's just covered floor to ceiling with pizza boxes, and it's yeah,
it,
it's
it's
great.
it's great, and I also love like the one fact I do know about it is the editor Jinmo Yang. He edited Train to Busan, by the way,
Oh wow.
and he also edited Okja. But just like a little filmmaking fact, he cut the whole movie on Final Cut 7, which is like a really outdated editing program, and that holds a special place, man.
Yeah.
There's something I love about like he's just like, yeah, I guess there's like better technology out there, but like this is the thing I know how to cut movies on, so I'm gonna cut movies on this like decade old,
Yeah.
editing software. And he's Oscar nominated. Did he win
Yeah.
an Oscar for editing? I
I
don't
think
know,
he
but
did. Let me bring that up real fast. I'm pretty sure it won like everything it was nominated for. But
God, so it's so good from beginning, middle to end. The scene that makes me the most like, oh, so sad to me, where they're almost gonna kind of like be able to pull off this caper and like do this right. But like that scene where the dad's driving the rich dad, the main dad in Parasite, and they're commenting. He keeps commenting on he's got a specific smell to
yeah.
him. There's something about that. I'm like, oh, this mother, come on, dude. Um, Something about that. It's like I feel like I've heard somebody say that to me. you know?
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, the smell of poor people, like
Yeah.
that's the implications. Like we never really get a sense of what he actually smells like. But he just doesn't smell like money, and it's like, ugh. It's um okay, so actually Jinmo Yang and the production designers did not win.
Didn't
Uh,
win.
they were the only two who were nominated and didn't win. It won Best International Film and won Best Picture. Obviously, it won Best Director and Best Screenplay. Um, which was
Amazing.
it's still great, but like
Still
you
great.
know, it should have won Best. I don't know, but
I should have won Best Acting. That's pretty good editing on film.
I think so. I, look, if I were voting, I would have voted for that. I will not pull up the other
Same,
nominees, but
same, same,
I
same.
refuse. And so yeah, so that was 2019. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened thereafter. He won all the awards in 2020, and then there was something called a pandemic. But the next
Yeah,
movie is another very kind of weird sci-fi movie called Mickey 17, starring Robert Pattinson a bunch of times. This one, Mickey Barnes has found himself in an extraordinary circumstance of working for an employer who demands the ultimate commitment to the job to die for a living, where he is cloned and dies a bunch of times. And I think that's a really weird premise, and I'm very stoked to see what all of this is about.
I was
It's
hyped.
wholly written and directed by Bong. He doesn't have any co-writers on this one. I guess Edward Ashton was the guy who wrote the book, but upon which it was based.
Oh, it was a
Anyway,
book. I didn't know that. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
this is exciting. It excites me that this movie is coming out next year. I think in February, something like that. But
I'd love to see Steven Yeun back in another one. You know, he was in
Mhm.
Okja, and he had not the biggest part, but I love him as an actor, and I think him with Bong is going to be amazing.
Yeah, totally. And Toni Collette, Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah. Oh my God, Toni Collette, come on.
Yeah, Toni Collette is a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think he's maybe the most exciting filmmaker working today, and just the fact that he's still relatively young and has clearly a lot more story in him, and I think that's really great because I could see him, being another Scorsese or somebody who just works forever.
Yeah.
And I would hope that's the case because his films are really, really interesting. But yeah, let's talk about your other three top favorite movies.
Happy to.
So your other one, this is of course on Letterboxd, which you can follow.
Yes.
Jason, do you want to be followed?
Yeah, please.
Okay,
Plug
follow
me,
Jason.
guys. Yeah.
Jason Nguyen TV. I will put that in the show notes so people can click on it. But
amazing.
So let's start with another one, which is one of my favorites, which is Akira from 1988, which is maybe the best animated film ever made.
Ever made.
It's so pretty, and also terrifying, and just like it's a movie. That movie and Dark City. Have you ever seen Dark City?
Yes, of course.
There was a period of time where I watched both of those movies at least once a year, and I would say it's for religious purposes because they're so kind of transcendent to my brain. Yeah.
It's
when
just
did you
something
see Akira for the first time?
Oh, so young. I saw Akira.
Right? Way too young.
I've seen. I keep seeing. I've rewatched it a million times, but I've seen it at different points of my life. So I feel like it's always around at different milestone moments in my life. But I remember when I first saw it, I must have been like 7 or 8 for sure.
It's a bit
really young. It's a little too young because I didn't, because so far the anime I was watching didn't have any blood in it, you know. So like to watch this, I was like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? But I was captivated. I was captivated by the style of it. I think still to this day, there's nothing that looks like Akira.
No.
There's nothing that comes even close to looking like Akira. And that's got to be a statement on its own. There's this thing about like hyper futurism and like cyberpunk that I know has like permeated pop culture, right? And it's something I know we really like, and I love movies like Blade Runner and stuff. But there's a look to Akira, like the specific like techno futurism of Akira, that is somehow so dope to me. Like the motorcycle gang aspect of it, the weird psychic creature aspect of it. I love movies like Dark City and like Akira, where I just know there's nothing like it on planet Earth, and nothing ever will be like it on planet Earth. And I want more movies like that. I missed that era where it was just like things came out and you're like, well, what is this? This is so weird and different and new. It's a really good story. I don't want to talk too much about it for any person out there who somehow hasn't seen Akira. Like, go watch it. It's amazing.
We don't need to get into the story of it, but it is like one of the so it's based on the manga by Katsuhiro Otomo, who also wrote and directed the film, and they're very different. Like the manga just keeps going, and the movie obviously has a definitive end. But it was and maybe still is, or at least for a long time was, the most expensive animated film Japan has ever produced, and maybe just the world. And the look that Jason was talking about, this was animated on ones, and if you know anything about animation, that is so hard to do because basically like every frame 24 or 30 depending on if you're using video or celluloid frames per second, that's what you get. And because animation takes such a long time, they generally animate on twos, which means one panel of drawing for every 2 frames. They did it on ones, which means every single frame of this movie had a different drawing. And that is bananas.
Bananas.
But that's why it has such a smooth look to it. All the animation is so fluid because it mimics reality in a lot of interesting ways, or at least the reality of film. But
yeah, it's the most cinematic anime I guess you could watch.
Yeah.
Like that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, there's that sequence where we, again, but like it's about like weird psychic
Yes.
powers and telekinesis and stuff like that. But a certain character has his like awakening of his powers, and he has these hallucinations in a hospital of these like giant teddy bears and like just toys like coming. And it is one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. Regardless of film, like it's a gorgeously disgusting sequence.
I think gorgeously disgusting is a great phrase for that. It's like I've never seen body horror in anime. You know what I mean? Like I was like, what the hell? Like I didn't think this was possible in anime at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Please go watch that one. Also on your list is Taika Waititi's film Hunt for the Wilder People, which is a blast. Delightful blast.
So fun. I love Taika as a filmmaker. He's another one of those guys who just I fall in love with his characters, and his humor is amazing. But Hunt for the Wilder People in particular it's on my top 4 because there's something so simple about that movie that I'm really attracted to, and that kid is I relate to. That's me, like a little troublemaker kid who's like throwing rocks at mailboxes, and has to like understand what love is, what parental love is, and so I really love that movie just for the simple fact that it's fun. There's nothing too like pretentious or filmmakery about it that I could get into, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's just a fun movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny, and there's so much heart to it. I think did you ever see, I think it's his first feature, but Boy, did you ever see that movie? It's a very similar vibe to it, where it's just a kid kind of realizing that adults can be both good and bad at the same time. And Taika's in that as the kid's dad, who is a deadbeat, and it's
honestly, it's a tie between I wanted to put a Taika movie as my top 4, but I almost put Jojo Rabbit, which I really love, and let's talk about heart that then becomes a really dark and tragic story. But I figured like, sometimes I think the thing I like about Taika is how fun he is, and how much of like an escape from reality it is sometimes for his stories, and Hunt for the Wilder People, it ekes out Jojo Rabbit just by a little bit for me.
Yeah, it definitely is the most, well, I mean, like obviously there's Thor Ragnarok and stuff, but like of the kind of pure Taika Waititi films, like this is the one I return to more, and it's just fun. It's a put on movie. You watch Sam Neill interact with Julian Dennison as the kid. They're so funny together, and they're just like,
they're so funny.
I walk around saying Ricky Baker for like 2 days afterwards.
Ricky Baker.
It's great. And then the last one on your list is La Haine or La Haine, which is a French film from 1995, which I watched in college. This was one of those like, dude, you gotta watch La Haine. Like, and so it's about 3 friends from different racial groups, but also like just different sides of Paris who are doing bad stuff, and it's black and white, and it's a really gorgeous kind of black and white movie. But we were talking about this slightly before we started recording, but what's about this movie that not that you need to tell me, but tell the world why you like this movie.
I have always been curious about this movie. I've seen clips of it. I had a copy of it when I was in college as well, but I never watched it because I was kind of getting burnt out watching all these like black and white films just for the sake of getting through like film history and stuff. And I was like on a kick of watching all these film noirs and French New Wave. And I was like, not another one. And I didn't give it the time of day back then. Watching it now, especially as like an aspiring filmmaker, as somebody who's making stuff like in my downtime all the time, there's a spirit to this movie that I think I really, really hope to have in the style of filmmaking I do, which is that there's this feeling of exploration and discovery that feels natural in it. There's the cinematography in it that feels just so cool
Yeah.
and real. It's Haine is it translates to the hate or just hate. It's a film by Matthew Kassovitz, who I don't, to be honest, like I don't know his filmography as well. I think he went on to do Amelie, right?
Yeah, I think
Not
you're right.
not even sure. Like I
Yeah.
just know that like I finally picked this movie up this year and watched it and was blown away by every aspect of it. The performances, the story, the sort of the nature of the film that is just like floating around and following these people around the city. But there's an indie filmmaking nature to it that I just love. Like it reminds me of, like, if we're talking about Asian cinema too, like Wong Kar-wai, where it's just running around the city with your three friends filming scenes, and not necessarily having a plan. It feels like that. I'm not sure if that's how it was made, but it feels like that. I know that they shot this film in color originally, and then they made it black and white, which I think was the right move. And it's just a gorgeous movie, with a really, really satisfying like plot arc with these
Yeah.
three friends, and it's tragic what happens in the movie. And it's oddly, when was this movie made? It was made in '95. It's oddly relatable, like, to now. I think you could really tie the discourse we've been going through as a society, especially here in America. But I think the French are no strangers to that sort of like political discourse.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
100%, right? And
Yeah.
so it captures this thing of like, how far would you go for your friends?
Mm.
How far would you go for your friends if you're under the thumb of oppression like that? And I didn't think I would like this film because, to be honest, it's not the cup of tea I usually go for.
Mm.
Like Bong Joon-ho and those type of films, and honestly, like big genre stuff, like I really get attracted to. But this movie felt like, oh, I should have watched it way earlier.
Yeah.
You know?
I know what you mean though, because like there's I think a safety curtain, I will say, like, to genre movies, because
Yeah.
even if the movie itself is not particularly safe, I often equate, like, especially old horror movies, but horror movies are like
Yeah.
my security blanket in a weird way, because it's like
Yes.
they're so out there. But like if it gets too realistic, I kind of like go, eh. And I
Yeah.
definitely, you know, I used to be kind of big of like, I got to watch all the Oscar movies, and I kind of go like,
Right.
if it's just a drama, I have a real hard time just kind of watching that stuff. Just
Right.
because I'm just like, wow, it seems like homework. And I
Yeah.
totally get what you mean, because when I was in college too, I was taking film classes, and it was like,
Yeah.
you know, every week we would watch a pillar of cinema, and it's just sort of like
Right.
that kind of burns you out watching that kind of stuff. But watching this movie, there was a small smattering of like cool, I would say, quote unquote, like drama
Yes.
movies, especially French ones. Actually, there's a lot of really interesting French movies, and um, Vincent Cassel is in a lot of
See the
movies that are from this era, like, uh, Irreversible.
so good.
It's good but terrible at the same time, and like he's a really like fascinating actor.
Yeah, I mean, he
Yeah,
like I have no idea why. I don't know if Lahane was nominated for anything. I think it was
I don't.
so indie that it wasn't, if to my recollection.
Yeah, let's see. Film
I don't
critics.
think
I
it was
mean,
like,
yeah, very. It won Best Director at Cannes or Cannes.
for
And then
sure. I
it
mean,
won a bunch.
that counts a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah. And it was Best Film at the César Awards, which is like the French Oscars.
Yeah.
But it,
I honestly think Vincent Cassel should have gotten an Oscar for this movie. Like, should have been nominated
yeah,
at least. Like, his performance in it is sensational, man. It's so good. Like, I couldn't glaze this movie. I know what I'm glazing all the movies that I love, but I don't care. I love
I don't
them
think
for a
there's anything wrong with
reason.
that. You love them for a
And
reason. You don't have to like
yeah,
pretend like, well, I love this movie, but it's fine.
no,
But
I truly love, like, he should have gotten an Oscar. All three of those guys
yeah.
are incredible. Um, they use their real names too, which is interesting
Hmm.
to me. Like Saeed, Hubert, and Vincent are the names of the characters in the film. Um, and I think that's cool. I think
Yeah.
there is, like, they feel like they're the real people and they're friends and they know each other and stuff. And there's an awkwardness to it, an unfinishedness to it that, like, man, it feels excessive. It feels like I can go out and make this tomorrow,
Hmm.
right? With like my camera and my friends. And
Yeah.
there's and not, but that isn't saying that to like devalue the cinematography in this movie, because
No, for
they do
sure.
they do shit that is quite hard and like complex, but like, you know what I mean though, right?
Yeah,
Kind
yeah.
of like, it feels like you could just go out and make this thing.
Yeah, there's an aspect of movies like that, especially from the 90s, the indie movie scene from the 90s, anywhere in the world, but where it feels like we're gonna put together a professional production, but we're gonna do it on the cheap and on the fly and just kind of, go out in the city and just kind of look at stuff. And like that's almost harder to do because like you don't know what you're going to get kind of thing. And it's so based on your own vision. You can't kind of hide it. You can't hide from it with like special effects or even just like the money you put into it for like sets and costumes and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a realism to that kind of thing. And I love that about indie movies from the 90s. But like
Yeah.
also French crime movies of the era too were really cool. Like
Yeah, I know.
there's an aspect
I
of
feel
those.
like that's my next deep dive, is like, okay, if I like this, like what else is in this lane?
Oh
Because
man.
I love this, you know.
Yeah. There, if you have you seen, yeah, I'm sure you have, the Jean-Luc Godard film. Yeah, that's how pretentious we're getting.
Yeah,
Um, Breathless, which is his big one.
of course, of
Um,
course.
Also in black and white, also just shot on the streets of Paris. Like, I think there is something
Yep.
very similar in terms of
Hmm.
like, the ethos behind both films, but like, obviously there's a completely different like tone and storyline and everything like that. Like, but they're both kind of like pastiches of American crime movies just from different eras and stuff, which I think is, you know,
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah. And you know what? We've been throwing the word around a lot, but like, pretentious. We love movies, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And we love all the nitty bitty, gritty things that go into
Hmm.
movies that I'm hoping the filmmakers are doing for us to notice. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like almost dishonoring these amazing filmmakers by saying that we're pretentious, because they're doing this so that we notice and we're like, damn,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's awesome. So, you know what? I'm taking a stand, Kyle. Taking a stand.
Let's do it.
I'm saying we just love movies, man, and that's okay.
If you take anything away from this podcast, it's that we love movies and that's okay.
I'm being defensive for no reason, and that's okay.
This is a podcast called Laser Focus, where we are focusing very hard on stuff.
Right.
Jason, this was a blast. Thank you so much for coming on.
So fun. Honestly, this is. Can we just do this as friends? Like, like
Yes,
every.
100%. Yes, we could do that.
Just literally call me and we can talk about any
Just
movie you want.
talk movies for 2 hours.
That
Yeah,
sounds like a great time to me.
yeah. I'm in. But for now, we do need to
For
end
now.
this so that I can eat
Yes.
lunch, but also so that you
Yeah.
can have your day back. How can people find you on the internet and your work, should they choose to do so?
Yes. So you can find me on the internet. Right now, I'm mostly on Instagram at Jason Nguyen TV. I'll spell it for you: JasonNguyen TV. And I just launched my own company called Room 105. You can find us at room105media.com. Our website's not up yet, but it will be very soon.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Are we LLC?
Yeah, baby.
Man, that's limited liability, folks. Yeah, and you can, and of course, watch Jason, as we talked about at the top, on Sagas of Sundry Goblin Mode. Please catch up with the first 11 episodes and see how weird Tippy is, because he's super weird. But also, just enjoy the ride. You can watch that on Geek and Sundry YouTube channel, or you can listen to it anywhere you get your podcasts via Realm. You can follow me on Instagram at functional_nerd. You can follow me on Letterboxd, Kyle_Anderson. I am newly back on Blue Sky, Kyle D. Anderson. So please find me there as well. I don't know why I chose 3 different handles for everything I do, but that's my choice. Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you again. Thank you all for listening. Join me again next time on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit nerdist.com.